All right, diving right in today, we're tackling revenue projections. Super important for sales and revenue leaders, folks like you listening in. We've got this great article, How to Calculate Revenue Projections and Avoid Costly Errors. And, well, I've got an expert here to break it all down. Call me Alex, and let's call my guest, Statman. He's a whiz with the numbers.
Happy to be here.
So, Statman, first off, why should revenue projections be, top of mind, especially for our listeners? You know the sales and revenue leaders out there.
Well, think of revenue projections like your financial GPS. Without them, you're driving blind, right? And this article, it throws out a pretty powerful stat. 97% of companies, the ones that really nail their forecasting, they hit their sales targets.
Whoa, 97%.
Yep, almost double the success rate compared to those who don't have that solid forecasting in place.
Okay, so it's not just about budgeting. It's about really hitting those goals. But let's back up a sec. What exactly does revenue projection mean? I mean, what are we really talking about here?
It's about understanding your business as a whole, not just sales, but the big picture. Think HR, marketing, operations, everything that goes into, making money. You're building a model of your revenue engine.
I like that, revenue engine. So how do we actually project revenue? Where do we even start?
This article, it lays out 3 basic steps. First, you've got to estimate your income. Think best case, worst case, the whole range. Let's say you've got 3 projects locked in, bringing in a solid $300,000, but you're also looking at 5 more that could potentially bring in, $5 million?
5 million, wow, that's a big difference.
Exactly, so you got to factor in that range. Then you calculate your projected expenses, right?
Yeah.
Investments, project costs, all those daily operational costs, everything.
And then I'm guessing you bring it all together.
Exactly. Subtract those expenses from your income, and what you've got is a realistic profit range. Gives you a good idea of what you're working with financially.
Okay, so we've got the why and kind of the basic how. Now let's get into those forecasting methods. The article mentions 8, but let's, focus on a few that are really key for our sales and revenue leaders. What do you think?
Sure. A really common one is historical forecasting. Basically, you're using past sales data to predict what might happen in the future. Pretty straightforward, but think about it. Let's say last year you launched a product that totally disrupted the market, relying only on sales from before that launch. Well, it wouldn't really capture your current growth potential, would it?
No, it'd be like using an old map to navigate a brand new city.
So what else is out there? What other approaches should we be thinking about?
Well, pipeline forecasting is a popular one. You're analyzing your current sales pipeline, trying to predict which deals will actually close. It's more dynamic than just looking at the past. But you're really relying on your sales team to give you accurate assessments. So it's all about having a clear view of those deals in motion, knowing which ones are likely to make it to the finish line. All right, one more forecasting method before we move on.
All right, let's talk multivariable analysis forecasting. This one's, it's like being a detective, piecing together all the clues. You're looking at market trends, your sales pipeline, past performance. You're trying to build a forecast that's really grounded in reality. It can be complex, but it gives you a much more complete picture.
Sounds like the ultimate data detective work. So we've got 3 different methods here: historical, pipeline, and this multivariable approach.
We do. And it's important to remember that, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. The trick is finding the one that best fits your business, your data, and what you're trying to achieve.
That makes a lot of sense. But even with these great methods, I'm guessing there are some traps we need to watch out for, things that can trip us up. Let's talk about those. Help our listeners avoid those pitfalls.
Absolutely. One of the biggest mistakes, relying on bad data. Garbage in, garbage out. If your data's flawed, your projections will be too. You got to be careful, double check your sources, make sure everything's consistent across different departments.
Data integrity, it's key. What else should we watch out for?
A lot of companies, they overlook their past sales data. It's like throwing away a treasure map. Even if it's not the only factor, historical data can give you some really valuable insights. Analyze it. Figure out your sales cycles, your conversion rates, any seasonal trends, that kind of stuff.
So it's about finding those patterns, the ones that can really help you strategize for the future. Awesome point. We'll be right back. Stick with us. We're going to uncover more of these pitfalls, and we'll talk about how to make your revenue projections as accurate and as actionable as possible.
We were talking about, not forgetting about past sales data. Like, you wouldn't throw away a treasure map, would you?
You're right. It's valuable stuff. So what other traps do companies fall into when they're putting together these projections?
Sometimes people forget about the customer journey. I mean, that's what really drives revenue, right? How customers interact with your brand.
So if you don't understand how they're buying, what influences their decisions, your projections could be totally off.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a leaky sales funnel. Lots of leads at the top, but they're all disappearing before they buy anything. Mapping that customer journey helps you, find those leaks and fix them.
Right. So it's about making sure everything's flowing smoothly towards that final purchase. Makes sense. What other pitfalls should our listeners be watching out for?
Relying too much on gut feelings. Intuition's good, but for accurate projections, you got to be data-driven. Keep things grounded, avoid bias.
Data as our compass. I like that. What about KPIs? The article mentioned those.
Yeah.
Key performance indicators, right?
Yeah, KPIs, they're like our guideposts. They make sure everyone's on the same page, working towards the same goals. When sales management, everyone's aligned on the metrics that really matter, you get a much more, cohesive approach.
So it's about setting those benchmarks and really tracking progress together.
Exactly. Clearly defined KPIs help you see what's working, what's not. Like instead of just looking at website traffic, you might track how many visitors download a specific white paper. More focused, more actionable.
Okay, before we wrap up this whole pitfalls thing, the article talked about constant adjustment, refining your approach.
Yeah.
Why is that so important, even if
That's
you've got, the most amazing forecasting methods?
Because things change constantly. New trends pop up. Markets go up and down. Customer preferences shift. Your projections have to keep up, or they become useless.
So it's not a one-time thing. You got to revisit, update, make adjustments.
Think of it like course correction. You plan a route, but you might hit detours or find a shortcut. You got to adjust if you want to get to your destination.
Great analogy. We've covered a lot: data integrity, forecasting methods, those common mistakes.
And remember, projections aren't about predicting the future perfectly. It's more about creating a roadmap, a way to make better decisions, use your resources wisely, and, really maximize your growth potential.
They're a tool, not a crystal ball.
Exactly. And the key is using that tool effectively. Good data, understanding the customer journey, and being willing to adapt.
Fantastic insight. So for our listeners, the people who want to put this into practice, right away, what are some key takeaways?
First, audit your data. Make sure it's clean, accurate, consistent. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. Second, go back and look at that historical data. Don't ignore it. You can learn a lot from past performance.
Two great starting points. What else can our listeners do to improve their forecasting?
Get everyone involved. Sales, marketing, everybody. Their input can make those projections way more accurate. Plus, it keeps everyone on the same page.
So it's about building a data-driven culture across the whole organization.
Absolutely. Encourage your team to use data, make it part of their decision-making process.
Awesome advice. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big message you want to leave our listeners with?
It really comes down to this. Revenue projections, they're not about predicting the future perfectly. It's about having a plan, a strategy, a way to, make smart choices and hit your goals.
They're a tool, not a fortune teller. We've said it a few times.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a process, right? You're constantly learning, adjusting, refining your approach. Things change. You got to change with them.
Great advice. Statman, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate all the insights. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning into this deep dive on revenue projections.
Happy to help.
We hope you walked away with some new ideas, some practical tips you can actually use. Remember, data is your friend. And that whole forecasting process, it's a journey. So stay curious, stay data-driven, and, keep those revenue engines running.